Welcome back to DCS, everybody. Another look at a new module I'm trying out. MiG-21 BIS by Leatherneck Simulations out of Sweden. MiG-21 was a supersonic jet fighter used by the Soviet Union, developed by the Soviet Union, used by over 50 countries. Was possibly the most produced supersonic jet fighter ever, according to many stats, depending on who you believe. I am doing a navigation self-training mission today, basically to get myself familiarized with 1960 navigation technology, which in a military aircraft you'd think would be a little more user-friendly than this, but then again, it was the 1960s. I have turned on my inverters and my DC battery. My little red blinky thing there is telling me there could be an issue. It does that a lot. It's not very specific. Doesn't have any sort of meaning behind it other than there is a problem when it blinks. These two, when they blink, that means, well, means you're about to stall, more or less. Today I am also experimenting with a voice activation software module for DCS that allows me to speak to the tower without having to press any buttons. Theoretically, I'm going to check my manual here real quick. I'm departing Novorossiysk, arriving on Napa, which is RSBN channel 1. The RSBN here is more or less a civilian VOR or DME, and it feeds into the HSI instrument here. And this is really difficult for me to understand because I was never trained in this sort of thing. When I learned to fly a real aircraft, I learned to fly a modern aircraft that didn't have this kind of thing. We had GPS, things like that. But back in the day, your airfield, your airbase, whatever, or your waypoint VORs would be a beacon, and they would just emit a given frequency. You have your preset channels built in by your ground crew. Same for the same for the communication radio, which is rather strange, by the way. Means that I cannot manually dial in radio frequency, so I cannot emergency divert to an airfield whose frequency I don't have, because I can't talk to them on the radio no matter how much I want to. So way to go, Soviet Union. So we powered up batteries, main DC battery, fuel pumps are on. Now we're gonna test out this fancy voice recognition and see about getting clearance to start. Let's turn the radio on first. There we go. Tower, option 1. Tower, request startup.
Махака, 505, запуск. 505. Махака, запуск разрешаю. Ветер у земли 077. Скорость 4 метров в секунду.
So that works. Go ahead and zero my altimeter. That's not powered yet, so I'll have to wait to align that. Okay. Engine APU is on, fire extinguisher is on, throttle is unlocked. Go ahead and lock and seal the canopy. RSBN selected. Let's turn this son of a bitch on. MiG-21, if you don't know, it's basically a metal tube with a jet engine in it, and you on top of it, and little itty-bitty fin wings on the back. It looks like a rocket, and it goes like one too. Does not turn very well. It skids more than it turns, which apparently pilots got pretty good at. That being said, it does still turn better than an F4 Phantom, which isn't saying much. Now, this simulation by Leatherneck is possibly one of the finest in DCS. Also, despite the fact that I have set no failures for my flight today, nor do I ever while I'm practicing or learning things, this simulation will still generate random failures at a very low rate. It doesn't happen very frequently, but there will be failures from time to time, even if you set it to 0 in the DCS master options, which not everybody likes, but you know, for a 1960s bucket like this, that's pretty realistic. You know, sometimes things just go wrong. And you know, the other day, well, actually yesterday, I started this thing up. No failures were set. I was just going to practice taxiing, which by the way, which you'd think, why should I practice taxiing? You steer the aircraft. You'd think that's pretty simple, right? Not in this aircraft. So I started it up, and my main hydraulic system had failed right out of the box before I even turned it on. So it's that accurate of a simulation, it even wastes your actual time. This is the only aircraft I've ever seen that has push buttons for the flaps. You push them into the mode you desire. I'm going to turn on our pitot heaters because it is cold outside. The air-to-air radar, known as the Sapphire, can only be operated for 25 minutes, according to the manual, after which time it will fry itself, which is a problem, so don't do it. It's a unique instrument most aircraft don't have right here. This is the nose cone position indicator. Because there is a nose cone, I don't know if you can see it, there's a cone sticking out of the air intake in the nose that moves forwards and backwards to adjust the boundary layer of air coming in and out to allow the engine to be fed at any temperature. I'm sorry, not any temperature, any speed rather. Aircraft's maximum speed, according to the manual, is just shy of 3,200 kilometers an hour, read on this dial here. And if you're paying attention, you may be asking, this aircraft can make 3,200 kph, why does the needle stop at 0? I'm glad you asked. You, the pilot, must count the number of times the needle spins around the dial. And you must keep track of this while flying, otherwise you will be horribly confused, and you could make a very big mistake. I'm gonna take my parking brake out. So your dial goes to 0. It's going to pass all the way around 3 times before you reach maximum speed. Now, if that doesn't make you uncomfortable, I don't know what does. But that's how it works. This is my Mach meter. It's my clock that I can't even see unless I do this with my head and bend down over the stick. Super, super awesome. That's my altitude in kilometers. No, that's meters. Altitude in meters. Speed in kilometers an hour. Turn indicator, Mach meter, fuel gauge, the exhaust gas temperature, fan speed for low pressure, high pressure turbine, angle attack indicator, G meter, which I will reset, radar warning receiver, weapon selector for weapon hard points. I just loaded the gun. There are 3 magazines. Once you empty one, you must manually reload it. That was a burst of compressed air. That was not a shot being fired. This little guy is the ARU, which is a hydraulic arm system that's underneath the aircraft. The control system in this aircraft is very primitive. There's a hydraulic primary and a pneumatic backup. To assist you in operating the aircraft, that arm can be set in 4 different modes, which will alter the method by which the throw by which the elevators are operated. So, everything's turned on, engine spinning, all the systems are live, everything looks happy. I suppose at this point it's time to tower. Request taxi to runway. Over.
Мысхака, 505, руление. 505, Мысхака. Разрешаю руление на полосу 2-2.
That reminds me, my arriving airfield, I want to set my runway heading 42. I'm sorry, 042. Yep. So basically the manual rotary that I'm setting right now will act as a reference for the runway bearing, or I'm sorry, runway heading rather. So when I get there in the general vicinity, I will be able to enter the pattern. It's pretty low tech, a little confusing at first. So that should be 010, 020, 030, and I want 042. That's more or less there. And then this other needle right here, that's my bearing to the RSBN station, or the otherwise known as the VOR for that airfield. If you're wondering, and everybody does, this cartoon bomb and the button underneath it are for dropping your external fuel tanks. I don't know why it's a yellow cartoon bomb. It just is. Taxiing this aircraft is an adventure. The nose wheel is a shopping cart wheel. It does not steer with the rotor pedals. It freewheels. Therefore, you pretty much are along for the ride. And the way the manual tells you to steer is you push the pedals in the direction you want to go. And by the way, you need to push the throttle up above 80% just to get moving. So you push the pedals the way you want to go. There's a compressed air bottle on board the aircraft, and you basically expend air out of a finite reservoir to steer the aircraft. You can hear the pneumatic system right there. So the danger is, in taxiing, that you may run out of air if you take a long time. It's a long taxi or whatever. You expend all your air, or too much, and that's all you have for braking, by the way, with your wheels. And it's also your backup. So if you run out and your hydraulic system fails and you have no air in the bottle, you've got no controls. So if you expend too much air while taxiing, when you come to land, you'll have no brakes. It's super amazing. By the way, this engine is of pretty much no use below 80% throttle. Like at all. Tower 505. Request takeoff. Tower 505. Request takeoff.
Махака, 505, взлет.
505. Махака. Взлет по готовности. Отход по схеме на 300. По давлению 2,9,39.
As you can see, the ATC and DCS is not super responsive. Now, I would normally have done a controls check before getting on the runway, but I can't see anything at the back of this aircraft at all. All I can see is the rudder. So you would have your ground crew stick an eyeball and everything, make sure it all works. Yeah, rearward visibility, yeah, there is none. So basically, to execute a turn, I'm holding my right pedal. I have been since I started moving. And then once I'm ready to turn, I jam on the brakes, and the aircraft pivots using differential brakes on the main gear, which is really dumb because that stresses the main gear out immensely. But these aircraft are extremely durable. Were used by complete idiots to shoot down multi-million-dollar American aircraft, so I can't really knock it. Alright, so flaps are in takeoff position. Ostensibly my shopping cart nose wheel is lined up. I'm hunkered down a bit so the sun doesn't blind me. I'm going to stand on the brakes. I'm going to trim my elevator up real quick. There we go. And we shopping cart for a moment. That's great. And then after a certain speed, I don't know what speed, the nose wheel locks. You have to pull back on the stick completely, all the way back. And then the hydraulic system will allow you to take off about 300 and change kilometers an hour. Lock the landing gear in. If you forget to lock the landing gear after takeoff, the compressor bottle will be left open, forcing the landing gear into up position. So if you leave that, it unlocked, you're basically, it's sitting there with no pin in it, and then your air bottle sits there and squeezes air into the gear, and by the time you come to land, you got no brakes again. So it does not pay to not pay attention to these things in this aircraft. It really doesn't pay to not pay attention to things in any aircraft, but this one especially, it's not annoying. It could be the end of you in a real aircraft. I got to see one of these fly at an air show here in Houston in November, and it looks and sounds inside and out exactly like this simulation by Leatherneck does. So good job, Sweden. Cockpit blue here is a Soviet standard color. It's designed to minimize stress on the pilot during long hours. Now if you're paying attention, you'll notice that my speed needle just went around the 0 once. So I'm coming up on 1100 kph. Come out of burner, and I can now check my range. I am 32 kilometers away from the RSBN station I am tuned to. I'll engage the MiG-21's quote-unquote autopilot. In the manual, it's this button here. It's labeled recovery mode. The red button cancels whatever mode you were in. And that's it. We're now cruising en route on our way at about 902 kilometers an hour, maybe a little more than that, 920. I don't know, I hate the metric system so very, very much, but we're on our way, and my trim thinks it's neutral. It is now. Bearing to my airfield right up ahead. I'm going to cross the runway a little bit north of 90 degrees, fly a pattern, and then comes the really hard part. I'm going to attempt to land this aircraft. I'm going to end the video here because I haven't yet to successfully land this aircraft with no damage sustained. So that is not something I'm interested in showing on video. But there you have it. Leatherneck Simulations MiG-21 BIS. Absolute joy to fly. A really fantastic simulation. And I'm sure I'm going to be spending dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of hours figuring out the idiosyncrasy of how to actually operate this thing without killing myself. That said, I will cancel autopilot, throw the brakes out, and begin my descent. And hang a right. And start flying my pattern around Anapa. Have a lovely day. See you again when I can land this thing safely.